gusta jugar muy agresivo, con muchos winners, como Federer, más o menos de un estilo como Federer, agresivo, yendo a la red.
Youngest career Grand Slam winner of all time.
Let's be honest about something that the polite tennis media refuses to say clearly. Novak Djokovic is watching his legacy get dismantled in real time, major by major, record by record. February 2026, Melbourne. Djokovic loses an Australian Open final for the first time in 11 attempts. The man who built his entire identity around that particular court, that particular tournament, that particular trophy, finally beaten by a 22-year-old Spaniard who had never even reached the final there before. Alcaraz didn't just win, he completed a career Grand Slam at an age when Djokovic hadn't yet won a single major. He knocked out a record held since 1938. He tied the head-to-head at 5-5, despite being 16 years younger. Djokovic is chasing a 25th Grand Slam. Alcaraz already has 7, with potentially 15 more years of elite tennis ahead.
A un año se tienen que ver ciertas cosas a nivel de contratos y bueno, pues como en todo contrato, digámoslo así, nuevo.
The trajectory isn't debatable. What's debatable is how far past 24 the final number lands. Tennis experts have stopped whispering about it. They're now openly admitting Carlos Alcaraz will shatter all Novak Djokovic records. Subscribe, because this channel covers the story behind the story. The question was never if, it was always by how much. Here's the thing about Novak Djokovic's records. They weren't built to be broken, they were built to be impossible. 24 Grand Slams, 10 Australian Open titles, a career Grand Slam completed at 29, a 428-week stretch at world number 1 that spanned over 8 years.
His first major as a father, Novak Djokovic.
These weren't just achievements, they were architectural, designed to outlast every rival, every generation, every argument, and for a long time, they did exactly that. Roger Federer retired at 20 slams. Rafael Nadal called time at 22. Both legends, both finished. Neither touched Djokovic's ceiling. The tennis world accepted that 24 was a number that belonged in a different category from everything that came before it. Then a 19-year-old from Murcia walked onto the US Open court in 2022, defeated Casper Ruud, and became the youngest world number 1 in ATP history. Nobody panicked, prodigies arrive and fade. Tennis history is full of them. What followed is where everything changed. Djokovic's 24 Grand Slam titles represent the highest total in men's tennis history. That fact is not in dispute. What is now in dispute is how long that number stays at the top. Alcaraz won his first slam at 19, his second at 20. By 22 years and 272 days old, he had 7. Let that breathe for a second. 7 Grand Slams before his 23rd birthday. Djokovic at the same age, he had won his first major at 20, the 2008 Australian Open. By 22, he had exactly 1, and then went 3 full years before winning his second. The projection math here isn't complicated, and it isn't kind to the Djokovic record. If Alcaraz maintains even a conservative pace of 2 slams per year through his mid-20s, which his 2024 and 2025 results suggest is entirely realistic, he reaches 17 majors before turning 27. Factor in his prime years between 27 and 30, and suddenly 24 stops looking like a ceiling and starts looking like a checkpoint. Sky Sports noted after the Australian Open final that Alcaraz and Sinner have now won 9 consecutive Grand Slams between them, dating back to Djokovic's last major triumph at the 2023 US Open, 9 straight. Djokovic has been frozen out of the slam conversation for over 2 full years, while Alcaraz kept collecting. Experts aren't projecting anymore, they're doing arithmetic. Of all Djokovic's records, the Australian Open one felt the most untouchable. 10 titles at Melbourne Park, a 104-match win record at the tournament, 11 finals without a single loss, until February 1st, 2026. Alcaraz didn't just win his first Australian Open, he He ended Djokovic's perfect finals record at the one venue where Djokovic had been literally unbeatable. First time in 11 attempts that Djokovic walked off Rod Laver Arena as a runner-up. First time the Norman Brooks Challenge Cup left his hands in a final. Alcaraz made his fifth appearance at the Australian Open and reached the final for the first time. He won it on the first attempt. Consider what that gap actually represents. Djokovic needed 11 finals across more than a decade to build his AO legacy. Alcaraz needed one to begin chipping at it. He is 22 years old. He has potentially 12 to 15 more Australian Opens left in his career. The idea that Djokovic's 10 AO titles will stand forever became significantly harder to defend the moment the Spaniard lifted that trophy in Melbourne. And the conversation hasn't even properly started yet. This one isn't a projection, it already happened. Djokovic completed his career Grand Slam in 2016 at Roland Garros. He was 29 years old, and it stood as the benchmark for the youngest man in the Open era to achieve the feat. Alcaraz completed his at 22 years and 272 days. That's 6 years younger than Djokovic managed it. He didn't just break the Open era record, he broke a record that dated back to Don Budge in 1938, making him the youngest man in the entire history of the sport to win all 4 majors. Gone, done, not close. The manner of it matters too. Alcaraz completed his career Grand Slam across just 12 major campaigns, destroying Nadal's previous Open-era record of 20. Djokovic took 34 major campaigns to do it. The efficiency gap between these two men at the same career stage isn't a talking point anymore. It's a documented historical fact that tennis analysts are now using as the baseline for every record conversation going forward. One record already belongs to Alcaraz. The rest are simply a matter of time. Before the 2026 Australian Open final, Djokovic led the head-to-head 5-4. Alcaraz's win tied it at 5-5. On the surface, that looks competitive and balanced. In context, it tells a completely different story. Djokovic is 38 years old. Alcaraz is 22. Their rivalry carries a 16-year age gap, the second widest between two finalists in Open-era major history. The fact that a 22-year-old has already leveled a head-to-head against the greatest player of all time isn't a sign of competitive balance. It's a sign of something shifting permanently. Historically, rivals who close a head-to-head deficit at this stage of the age curve don't stop closing it. Alcaraz has beaten Djokovic in 3 of their last 4 meetings: the Wimbledon 2023 final, the Wimbledon 2024 final in straight sets, and now the 2026 Australian Open final. In Grand Slam finals specifically, Alcaraz leads 3-2. At 38, Djokovic is not getting faster, not recovering quicker, and not playing more tournaments. Alcaraz at 22 is still physically developing. The trajectory of this head-to-head has one logical direction, and it doesn't favor the man already chasing 25. Djokovic's 428 weeks at world number 1 is the record that gets the least attention in this conversation and deserves the most. It captures sustained dominance over time, not just peak moments, but consistent excellence across an entire career. Alcaraz has spent 60 weeks at number 1 so far. The gap looks enormous on the surface. Context matters enormously here though. Alcaraz became number 1 at 19. He has already reclaimed the top spot twice, after losing it, fighting back, and reasserting himself. He finished 2022 and 2025 as year-end number 1. His ability to hold and reclaim the ranking across different seasons signals exactly the kind of sustained consistency that accumulates weeks over a long career. If Alcaraz holds the number 1 position for an average of 30 weeks per year across the next decade, a conservative estimate given his current dominance, he surpasses Djokovic's 428-week record before turning 35. That's not optimistic forecasting. That's a moderate projection built entirely on what he has already demonstrated at 22. Djokovic also holds the record for 8 year-end number 1 finishes. Alcaraz already has 2 at 19 and 22. He has the runway to chase that number down as well. And unlike the Grand Slam record, this one accumulates quietly, week by week, without anyone noticing until it's already too late. Nobody in mainstream tennis coverage is putting a hard number on it yet. That's the part that drives the honest fan slightly mad. The hedging, the qualifications, well, it depends on injuries disclaimers that allow pundits to avoid committing to the obvious conclusion sitting right in front of them. Read past the careful language, though, and the message underneath is consistent. ATP Tour coverage following the 2026 Australian Open explicitly framed Alcaraz as chasing records. Sky Sports analysts described his 7-slam collection at 22 as the foundation of something that could redefine the all-time men's conversation entirely. The post-AO analysis across major outlets wasn't asking whether Alcaraz belongs in the GOAT debate. It was asking at what point the debate stops being a debate at all. That's a meaningful shift. 2 years ago, the question was whether Alcaraz was the future. Now the question is how much of the past he ends up rewriting. Tennis experts are admitting Carlos Alcaraz will shatter all Novak Djokovic records, not in press conferences, not with bold headlines, but in the arithmetic they're quietly running and the framing they're no longer bothering to soften. The vocabulary has changed. Words like historic, legendary, and inevitable are appearing in places where potential used to live. So here's where it lands. 7 Grand Slams at 22, the youngest career Grand Slam in the history of the sport. A head-to-head tied against the greatest player alive. An Australian Open Finals record cracked on the very first attempt. A weeks at #1 trajectory pointed somewhere deeply uncomfortable for the record books. The only thing standing between Alcaraz and every single Djokovic benchmark is time. At 22, time is the one resource he has in absolute abundance. Djokovic is still fighting, still hungry, still capable of winning another major, and nobody serious should count that out. But fighting to protect records and building them are two fundamentally different positions to occupy. One man is defending, the other is still constructing. The real question, the one that keeps the honest tennis analyst up at night, isn't whether Alcaraz shatters these records. At this pace, with this efficiency, with this much career ahead of him, the math makes that conclusion nearly unavoidable. The question is which record falls first, and whether Djokovic is still around to watch it happen. If this kind of unfiltered, evidence-based tennis coverage is what you've been missing, subscribe right now and hit the bell. Because when the next record gets crossed off the list, this channel will be the first place breaking down exactly what it means.